How's it going, lads? It's the Bald Boomer Biosparks. With Hardcore Classic WoW being released at some point this summer, those of you that are looking to embrace the challenge of traveling through Azeroth as a very mortal adventurer will have to consider which class to play. Today, we will be covering the Master of Fell Magic and Demons, the Warlock class, and what it has at its disposal in the Hardcore game mode. But just before we begin, please remember to hit that like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. With that out of the way, let's get stuck into today's video. As one of the two classes with access to pets, Warlocks have a very useful set of tools to help them tackle the challenges of Hardcore mode. Their access to different pets allows the Warlock to be prepared for different situations. In terms of resource management, a Warlock needs to stay on top of their soul stones, and they can life tap to convert health into more spell casting output, which keeps downtime to a minimum. Although they do need to be conservative with this, as running around with low health on Hardcore is always a risky proposition. The playstyle the Warlock employs best is mixing damage over time and direct spell damage alongside using their wand and demon as reliable damage output. Not to mention they have access to powerful crowd control abilities, allowing for a smooth leveling experience in the right hands. Ultimately, the Warlock is definitely a very beginner-friendly class that is easy to pick up without too many barriers to entry and is rated a 5 out of 5 in this category. When it comes to hard-casted single-target damage, the Warlock doesn't really have much variety since they mainly use Shadow Bolt and Searing Pain, and even then Shadow Bolt in most cases is almost always preferred. However, the true strength of the Warlock comes in the form of its three main damage over time spells: Curse of Agony, Corruption, and Immolate. The reason why these three spells are so powerful is that the Warlock can essentially take down multiple enemies by having these three spells active and keeping one enemy feared almost indefinitely, and the other can be tanked by the Warlock's demon. Or for more advanced players, they can juggle the fear between two mobs. So while technically these spells are single target in nature, the fact that they can be applied to multiple enemies and crowd controlled simultaneously means that the Warlock is technically able to pseudo-cleave these enemies down. Once you add in the damage from a wand into the mix as well as from their demon, the Warlock has access to some very efficient and consistent sources of damage to take down enemies. A word of warning, however, the decision to use fear on an enemy is one that has to be thought through. For example, using fear in a very open space where the mobs are quite spread out has minimal danger, compared to using fear in a cave where that mob can easily run into several packs and leash onto you is definitely putting yourself at unnecessary risk. Ultimately, Warlocks have the luxury of casting damage over time spells to multiple mobs, but they need to decide when this is in their best interest. As a result of having a consistent and efficient mix of damage over time abilities and direct damage, the Warlock ultimately scores a high 4 out of 5 in this category. For area of effect damage, the Warlock has access to Rain of Fire and Hellfire, and while they are abilities that provide decent damage, their main drawbacks are that firstly, the Warlock will receive pushback channeling the spell, and more importantly, the Warlock will pull threat off of their demon and be taking a lot of direct damage, and even the spell Hellfire also does damage to the Warlock as it channels. A Voidwalker Sacrifice Shield can prevent the pushback, but it's not something a Warlock should be doing often. These spells are much better suited when used in a dungeon, providing area of effect support where a tank can hold threat and a healer is able to support just in case things go sideways. Do not confuse the Warlock as some sort of area of effect master comparable to the Mage, where they have access to many slowing abilities and blink to keep their distance from enemies. As a result, whilst the Warlock can pump out some decent damage with their main area of effect spells, the fact that they don't have the tools to do this safely or consistently brings their score to an average 3 out of 5. A Warlock's strength comes from their survivability. Stamina is their best stat while leveling, giving them a twofold bonus of high amounts of health but also on-demand life taps when needed, making intellect a less essential stat compared to other casters. The Voidwalker fills a tanking role for the Warlock, taking the majority of the damage when facing mobs, and also comes equipped with a high threat generating spell, alongside providing the Warlock a huge shield with Sacrifice. This ability adds such a large safety net for the Warlock when they end up in a tough situation. Also, the ability can be talented to absorb 30% more damage. However, you also have the option of using the Succubus, which has a far higher damage output which focuses on faster kill speeds at the expense of being slightly less tanky. Here is Stayafe explaining why he personally prefers the Succubus and how he can still use the Sacrifice Shield when needed in emergencies.
Yes, Succubus is the best Warlock demon for leveling. It is very, very good. It is very, very good. Does a ton of damage. Does a good amount of threat. Is actually reasonably tanky too. The Voidwalker just sucks. It just sucks. It doesn't do damage, and it doesn't do good threat. Now, the one thing you get from the Voidwalker that a lot of people will bring up is the Voidwalker Sacrifice Shield, which can be very helpful when hardcore leveling. What we do an extra 4 points in the demo tree, which allows us to get Fell Domination and 2 points into Master Summoner. So if we ever need to use that Voidwalker Shield, we can still use, within a 0.5 second window, every 15 minutes, we've still got the Voidwalker shield. But we don't have to actually use a Voidwalker to do that. We use Succubus, and then we've got that defensive cooldown if we need it. And that's how we do it. But I'll tell you what, the Succubus is insanely good. Insanely good.
Ultimately, it's your choice which demon you prefer to use when questing, as they are both viable, but if you really want to be on the safe side, then you can use the Voidwalker just in case. The demonology tree is also full of talents that provide stamina to both the Warlock and their demons, as well as damage mitigation. This makes the Warlock almost like a tank in caster form that can get away with taking quite a considerable amount of damage where other classes would be in serious danger of dying. This is especially the case once the Soul Link talent has been taken, which is an incredibly huge power spike for the Warlock, where both the caster and demon will deal 3% more damage, but also 30% of damage taken will be transferred to the demon instead. On top of all this, the Warlock also has access to Fear, Howl of Terror and Death Coil, which also adds very reliable on-demand crowd control for the Warlock. Fears can be used almost indefinitely in the PvE setting since they do not suffer diminishing returns, although they can break early due to damage received. Warlocks are also able to drain the health of their enemies directly with Drain Life, alongside health stones, which means that a Warlock is never without some kind of health potion ready to go at a moment's notice. However, the Warlock is not without its disadvantages. The main limitation is their lack of mobility. While being able to take a lot of damage and having various survival tools, these are meaningless if the Warlock cannot get enough distance and escape danger. So keep in mind that while you have access to quite a lot of survivability, if your positioning is bad and you end up swarmed with enemies, you will most likely lose your character. If anything, I would say overconfidence is the most common mistake a Warlock can make, which can lead to unnecessary risk-taking and ultimately death. With all these benefits and just one major drawback, the Warlock scores a very good 4 out of 5 in survivability. Warlocks have an extremely easy time when it comes to leveling speed. The fact that they have a demon to assist them means that they are taking less damage and are able to stay healthy with less need to stop and eat, which in turn also means that they can use Life Tap to continue grinding mobs with minimal downtime. Not only this, but their very reliable damage means their kill speeds are quick and are able to rack up experience very easily. They also have the added bonus of not having to spend gold like other classes do for their mount at level 40. This in turn allows the player to use their gold on other luxuries. Overall, once a Warlock has their key abilities and demons from level 10 onwards, they have some of the most efficient leveling speeds in the game and are rated a 5 out of 5 in this category. Warlocks are very useful in dungeons and groups because they provide a balance of good damage as well as utility. Curse of Tongues also has its place if there are mobs with dangerous spellcasting capability to limit how quickly they can cast. The Warlock can also use their demons depending on the situation. The Inn can provide Blood Pact to provide the party with stamina. A Voidwalker can be used to off-tank a target if the group's tank has some problems holding threat on multiple targets. The Fellhunter can silence targets and dispel magical buffs from enemies or dispel a negative effect from an ally. And while Fear isn't recommended to be used in dungeons most of the time due to the risk of pulling more packs, the Warlock can use the Succubus Charm as a very reliable form of crowd control instead. As mentioned before, the Warlock can provide health stones for the whole party that they can use on top of health potions to improve survivability. All these utility options, alongside their reliable damage that they provide, make them a great choice to bring along to a group. Overall, I would rate them a 4 out of 5 in this category. When it comes down to race choices for the Alliance, there is only one clear option since hardcore is focused around PvE content, and that is the Gnome. Raw Intellect and Escape Artist to help the Warlock escape movement and pairing effects are the most impactful. Humans' Racial of Extra Spirit really pales in comparison, and their Racial of Perception only really has any part to play in PvP and the very occasional area where there are stealth mobs lurking around. But it really doesn't warrant a choice considering the Fellhunter can also provide extra stealth detection. As for the Horde, it comes down to preference. Orcs provide 5% more damage from your demons, which is a nice bonus, and some extra stun resist. Undead's Will of the Forsaken makes being feared less of an issue, but even then it's quite rare for mobs to have an ability to fear you, and since you are also a ranged class you can avoid them more easily. Cannibalize also helps with less downtime in humanoid and undead areas, which can be a small bonus. Ultimately, the choice is down to whether you value stun resist or an on-demand fear immunity. Either way, there is no bad choice between orc and undead. The first and most important thing you need to be doing with your professions is securing your lesser magic wand, which only requires you to be level 5 to obtain. To do this, simply focus on farming humanoid mobs that drop linen cloth. By using tailoring to craft brown linen robes and disenchant them, you will be able to craft the lesser magic wand. The The wand is an essential part of your damage rotation, and securing the lesser magic wand will make your journey through the early levels go much more smoothly. You could level up enchanting further using the same method up to 70 to then obtain the greater magic wand if you wish, or if you want to pass on that, you can drop tailoring and enchanting for your professions of choice. In the vast majority of cases, herbalism and alchemy will provide you with a vast array of potions and elixirs that will provide many stat boosts, survivability as well as utility that it's never a bad choice to use while you are leveling, and far surpasses any beneficial stats enchanting will give you. Mining and engineering can be useful if you are intent on crafting several gadgets and item consumables such as grenades to assist you in your journey, and can provide some very minor area of effect capability, as well as target dummies that can aggro mobs off you if you pull too much. Don't forget that cooking provides food with stats that can benefit every class while leveling, and it is very easy to get access to meat while leveling, or even fishing if you want to invest time into that. And of course, first aid is always a must that can provide you with some very quick healing in case of emergencies. When it comes to talent choices, your best bet for survival is going for a strong demonology spec. You'll want to put your first 5 points into improved corruption to make it instant cast, and then you can make your way down the demonology tree. This is where you'll find all the improvements to your survivability and damage increases for you and your demons. At the end of the tree you'll unlock Soul Link, which is such a powerful talent to have. It is worth to respec at level 40 so that you can get it right away, especially since you don't need to use your gold to buy an expensive mount. While there are other specs that are viable, nothing compares to demonology in terms of raw survivability bonuses, and if you consider that hardcore mode only allows you one life, it is by far the safest choice to make. As for general tips for the Warlock, make sure you manage your soul shards adequately. While you don't need to stockpile loads of them, make sure you have enough so that you can always summon your required demons when needed. Pet management is very important since you don't want to lose control of your demon or aggro unnecessary mobs. Some simple macros will save you a lot of headaches when trying to use your demon effectively. If you are planning to solo an elite quest or a tough enemy, you can start combat with having your Voidwalker sacrifice shield up since it lasts for 30 seconds, meaning you have your next shield ready to go if needed. Your fear is a very powerful crowd control tool that can be kept up almost indefinitely on an enemy. However, you do need to keep in mind that it does come with the risk of aggroing more mobs in the nearby vicinity and can cause you to become overwhelmed. You can use Curse of Recklessness to grant the mob fear immunity to prevent it from running too far so this issue is resolved, but even so I would still not recommend using fear in areas where the mobs are packed tightly together such as caves. Warlocks can use Rain of Fire to split pull several mobs and put them on separate leashes. This is very useful if there is only one mob you want to kill from a certain pack rather than taking them all on at the same time. Use it whenever possible to drag mobs away from densely packed areas. Always think about which demon is useful for the problem you are aiming to tackle. Don't fall into the trap thinking the Voidwalker is the only useful demon you have available to you. This is especially relevant in dungeons. Does your party need some hard crowd control? Then use the Succubus. Do they need an off-tank? Use the Voidwalker. If you're in need of silence or dispel effects, then the Fellhunter should be used. Even Blood Pact from the Imp can be useful if your party needs some extra health and there isn't a need for any other demon to be used in its place. Be more vigilant in areas where you are fighting undead. They are all immune to fear, which eliminates one of your strongest forms of crowd control. If you are overwhelmed by undead mobs, it can create very dangerous situations. Once a Warlock has their important demonology talents alongside gear with lots of stamina, you'll find that you are quite tanky. However, do not succumb to overconfidence to think you are invincible and can solo any elite quest that comes your way. Carelessness will be your most likely downfall. And finally, is the Warlock a good choice for hardcore mode? If you are looking for a very strong class that can tackle the challenges of hardcore mode head on, then the Warlock is a very strong pick in this regard. The Warlock is very self-sustainable in solo play, meaning that you don't really need to rely on anyone else, and you can even tackle a few elite quests on your own with some thorough planning and preparation. One downside is that as a DPS class you may have some trouble finding a group for dungeons since there will always be many other players competing for a space in groups. That being said, since you are not a gear dependent class, it's not a huge issue if you skip a few dungeons. If endgame raiding in hardcore mode is your thing, then there will always be a few slots available in raiding teams since there will be some important curses that need to be kept up on boss fights. Ultimately, if you are looking for a very strong all-round class with very few weaknesses and ample amounts of utility, then the Warlock is the class for you. And that concludes everything you should know if you decide to play a Warlock in Hardcore Classic WoW. If you have any requests as to what class you'd like to see next, put them down in the comments below. This is the Bald Boomer Biosparks, signing out. Catch you lads next time.